Good evening, folks. Appreciate you guys tuning in here tonight with Toxey, Cuz, and myself. I am pretty much going to lay low and probably turn my camera off for the most part and just facilitate y'all's questions. But yeah, great opportunity here to interact, bounce questions off of Toxey and Cuz. They're going to kind of share some of their greatest memories with Mossy Oak and together filming hunts. And obviously Mossy Oak started almost 3 decades ago, over 3 decades ago, Toxey?
Yeah, 37 years ago, maybe.
Almost 4 decades ago. So
Yep.
yeah, I'm sure you and Cuz are not short on colorful commentary from throughout the years. But yeah, just want to kick it off. And obviously there's a bunch of people coming in here. So the chat is a great place to say, hey, I'm Bob from North Carolina or whatever it may be. And then, if you have questions that you would like us to facilitate to Toxey or Cuz, throw those in the Q&A and I will be here to do that. But yeah, Toxey, Cuz, what are you guys seeing on your farms? What are you seeing on trail cameras? Have you been out? What's the latest with the 411 on your guys' properties?
Whoa, wait a minute now. You said we were going to tell deer stories. You didn't tell us we are going to have to give up some fresh recon on anything. That's a whole different topic, brother.
Hey, we always need a little appetizer before the main course, Toxey.
You know, deer have gotten pretty nocturnal in places around here. Cousin can attest to that too. We're depending on where we have a place to hunt here at home in Mississippi. Our probably our peak rut and estrus and breeding is probably the 15th to Christmas. And then my places in Alabama are more like the 1st of January and then the second week in January, depending on where you are. So we're kind of in that dead spot here where they start to get a little nocturnal compared to early bow season. So I've got a deer that I've been looking at for a couple of years, and he just in the last couple of days he'd probably be as good a deer as I've ever killed. And so I think if the wind holds up, I'm gonna go after him tomorrow. But he's been showing himself in daylight for a couple of days, which is rare, and so I don't want to miss that chance. That's about all I can say. I always tell Cuz, I tell you what I saw, or I'll tell you where I saw something, but I won't ever tell you both.
Yeah, Toxey knows how to play that game. I don't have anything near that exciting. I was telling you before we got kicked off here that my farm gets very little pressure. Toxey can attest to that. And I don't know that I've ever had a good daylight trail camera picture of a decent buck until December. I mean, they just don't move. I've set it up to where the habitat's good. Maybe they don't have to, but the rut, Toxey knows exactly when it is out here, and I do too. It's between the 15th of December and Christmas. All the best deer we've ever shot out here. I don't know how many it was, 6 or 7 or 8 over 20 years, but 4 of them are on Christmas Eve. Yep. And that's pretty amazing. Christmas Eve's a day you don't want to miss out here, but and that's cool. I'm fine with that. I went today and I knew I wasn't going to see a buck. It was a good day. I had the right wind for my favorite little sit, and I saw 8 or 9 does, kind of late, but it was one of those days. Toxey can attest to this down here. I guess you have them everywhere. It got so still and so quiet. There's no way I could have drawn and shot a buck and he'd be standing there at 20 yards. It was just, but I still love it. It still fires me up. And as long as I'm able to get up in that ladder or whatever I got, I'm going.
Yeah, today would have been a really good day around here. And I think universal, it's a front's come through. It's been really cold for this time of year, and it's high pressure, dead calm. As Bob Dixon used to say, a pristine day. And we all have more deer on their feet in daylight on days like that. But it's tough, though. Really tough to get drawn if you get one.
I'm doing something a little different out here. I'm still in training with grandsons, 3 of them. Toxey knows this. Like 10, 15, and 16 or 17. And they're just gotten their compound bows. Cranky's kind of, my youngest one, he's struggling with dominant eye issues that I had when I was young.
I
He can
had
shoot a group. He can shoot a group like this at 20 yards and go pull his arrows and come back, and then there'll be 15 inches to the left. His eyes are doing this. And so he's going to hunt with a crossbow, but it's fun. But I didn't put out a bunch of trail cameras because I took them through the woods Saturday looking for a scrape or rubs, whatever it was. And then Saturday afternoon, Matt saw a nice buck in the daylight, which shocked us all, but he was so excited he couldn't stand it. And had I had trail camera pictures, he would have been expecting it. So I'm just wanting him to feel like we used to feel back in the day, Toxey, when it's like, oh my God, there's Muy Grande. So that's kind of fun.
it is. Absolutely.
Yeah, introducing the next generation is no doubt a pleasure and a privilege, and especially if it's your own blood, it can't get any better than that. So, I mean, I know you guys have more stories to tell than the next 45 minutes or so can possibly hold. I know you guys touched on a couple that you wanted to talk about. So I say we dive in, and we're gonna enjoy our popcorn while you guys go back and forth on some of the all-time great stories from your guys' deer hunting days with Mossy Oak.
Well, yeah. Gosh, where'd you start? I know there's one in particular. We probably need to save that one for later. I would tell you this: they sent me one of the first Bottomland Matthews bows last week to shoot some promotional stuff, whatever. And Cuz wanted me to tell this. I've never, in all my years shooting archery, I've actually never done this. And so, the first shot Rusty gave me, it was just a little short for me, which I don't mind. As long as it's not way too short. I know if it's too long, you can get a little sloppy. So anyway, he said now it's going to shoot. He let the poundage off. He said it's going to shoot a little bit. It's going to shoot a little bit low. So I held the first shot high and it hit high. I said, well, it's shooting right where it should. I need to go back. So they pulled there, shot some photography, shooting some video. I shot, after that, bullseye right in the middle. And so pull it, another air, boom, perfect Robin Hood. I've never done that. I'm 63 years old. And it's the first arrows I've ever shot with that bow. I've actually got it. And the funny thing is they went to, it's a Bottomland Matthews. They had gone to the local Walmart and gotten the Mossy Oak arrows. So that both arrows have this big Mossy Oak on the side of them. I put it up like a trophy. But what are the odds of that? I mean, y'all that have done that, you have to have it. It has to be exactly perfect. It really buried down the whole shaft, probably because 12 inches or more, wow. And under shaft, but it didn't explode or anything. All the outside arrow that it went into is still intact with the other one down the middle of it. It's crazy.
It is, and it's so rare these days with those littler arrows.
Yeah.
Carbon. You'd see them back in the day with those great big aluminum arrows. Yeah. You've been in my office up there. I got 7 or 8, and I'll tell you, all but 1 or 2 of them, I wasn't even shooting with a sight. I was tuning bows, shooting through paper and stuff, and did them with those big old aluminum shafts. To do it these days, especially, perfect. You see people knock knocks off and all, but Toxey sent me that picture, and I said, dude, that's a sign.
I guess.
From above, whatever you do, don't ever let anybody touch that bow and go hunt a big deer with it, because that's crazy.
So I'm gonna tee you up this story and let Cuz tell it. So 30 years ago or so, at least, we got going, we got started. We were like, and one of the things I want to be sure and point out is that 35 years ago, even, and we were like kids, and we were so excited about every little hunt and every little doe we killed and all. And I think it's so important to maintain that, no matter how successful you are or how many big deer you killed or anything like that. So the one thing, and asked to do this, I look back on all our time hanging in a tree together, and what I realized, it wasn't, even though there's a couple of pretty epic things and some of them been documented with video, the coolest thing of all is like all that time we got to spend together, in a tree. I mean, and looking back, it was a bunch. And no matter how few times we were successful or what happened or what the conditions are, we always were like little kids, even though we were, 30 and 40 and even up to 50 years old back at the time. We were just like little kids, and we didn't have, not to, whine about anything today or in the past, but we didn't have, trail cameras or feeders, any of that stuff that is going on. And I love hunting with the aid of that today, but it was all, like he talked about with taking his kids today. It was, scouting and, finding some great rub convergence zone and, having to go by that. Or I always called it, I kind of coined that phrase people using now, MRI. If you had actually seen something yourself, that was the best. That's like having a camera would be today. But I guess my point to everybody is like, cherish that time together when you go hunting with folks, because that's the stuff I'll always be eternally grateful for. And it's like divine providence that God brought me and Cuz together to spend all that time and, those developing days of Mossy Oak and whatnot. Because that's actually, when I look back, more important than any single deer we kill. Cuz.
Amen. I'm gonna let Toxey tell the most famous bow hunt ever. He knows which one I'm talking about, but I don't even know if Toxey remembers this. It's very vivid in my memory bank, and I always look back. It was a hunt. It was down by Choctaw Bluff, and we were in the worst tree you can ever imagine. It had 9,000 limbs on it. How we got 2 stands in there, I will never know. We were so fired up to be somewhere other than Clay County or Adams County, Mississippi. But I call it the learning tree because I learned a couple of valuable lessons down there on that hunt. First thing that happened, this was a giant acorn tree we were in that was just raining acorns. And it was just the coolest place ever. And I guess we'd been set up about 30 or 40 minutes. And again, I don't know how much Toxey remembers of this. They moved in down there with a tractor and a disc. They had already harvested whatever they were going to take, and they ran that tractor for an hour and a half, disking that, whatever it was, a 10-acre field right in front of us. And I was so upset, and I was like, mad, we ain't going to see anything. Well, boom, 15 minutes after the tractor leave, the deer starts coming in. And I was like, well, I learned something today. Them deer are smart. They know what's going on. They're not paying any attention to that equipment. Well, first big doe came in. We weren't big on patience back then, and we weren't waiting for no 200-inch deer. We were filming. Toxey just whack. He hit one. I couldn't tell. He had this great old big gigantic bow with wheels on it, an Oregon bow.
48 inch.
Oh, it was so big. And, they weren't fast or anything like that, but he hit that deer so hard it almost knocked it down. And I couldn't see her. There's branches in the way. Again, we were in the giant tree. Anyway, the deer ran off. So we go to find the deer. Toxey finds his arrow, and it's covered. I mean, absolutely covered from end to end in stomach matter and guts and all that.
Brain slime.
Yeah, I was like, man, we need to. Toxey said, I didn't hit the deer there. I'm just telling you. And I'm shaking my head going, well, that arrow ain't agreeing with what you're saying. And I didn't have a good look at it. Anyway, Toxey was not going to take no for an answer. I was like, we need to back out, blah, blah, blah. Toxey makes maybe 50 steps and finds the deer. I mean, it didn't go anywhere. Gigantic blood trail. And what had happened was the arrow had went in perfect sideways. And when the deer went down, it wheeled, it kicked it up, and it shot that arrow almost through the deer's throat. And it got all that stuff out of the throat that looked just like stomach matter. But I learned a valuable lesson about tracking in. Nobody knows everything. Nobody's an expert. You got, man, when you're bow hunting like that, you can learn something every time. And I remember that tree that day, I learned 2 valuable lessons right there that have stuck with me forever. I don't know if Toxey remembers that day or not, but it's pretty special to me.
I actually do. That's actually one I'd written a story down, because it was like, we came up with that term, no man's land. Is very rare, but you can shoot an arrow right through the boiler room and not necessarily have a lethal shot too. And right behind the shoulder blade.
That arrow turned, went up, and it had stomach matter all over. I was like, gut shot, let's come back in 6 hours.
I gotta tell this story. So back what I was talking about earlier, in those early days, we got so excited when we found out the the deer season's open in August in South Carolina. Remember that?
Yes, sir.
You know, it didn't take us, especially with Cuz and Bob Dixon running point for you. Good guys, they could charm anybody out of a set of keys to go hunting somewhere. And we had a place to go in South Carolina, and we drove. And it was we had one of the guys film for us, and Bob and Cuz and I, and so Cuz and I were going to go. The other two were going to go together, and we drove all night. Got to this camp. They had directions, kind of a little bit of a map thing back then. That's all we had. Thank God today for onX. But I'm telling you, it's amazing. I don't even want to get started about that. That's amazing. So anyway, we go out and we walk down this road, and it looks like there's a creek here in the dark with flashlights. Just totally wildcat climb a tree. And I'm telling you, to this day, that was the most miserable and the most mosquitoes I've ever seen in my entire 3 years. It was the most, and within 30 minutes, we weren't prepared. There weren't thermocells back then. We didn't have any kind of spray. And within 30 minutes, we climbed down and came back out. But if you remember also, Cuz, that's the same hunt that my 48-inch Oregon bow blew up on me. Remember?
Yeah, because it was so hot. The mosquitoes, we didn't have anything. The mosquitoes were so bad. I reached in my backpack and I put my rain suit on, and it was already close to 100 degrees. We're hunting on the edge of a cornfield, and you talking about a sauna suit. But let me tell you what I remember about that hunt. We got down and said, we got to find a sure enough place because we can't hunt over an hour. So the mosquitoes were too bad. Toxey was driving his truck. It was an old GMC.
Right.
And he was driving. I was in the passenger side. We were driving all the way around this cornfield, going pretty slow, looking for acorns or trails coming in. We didn't have a lot of time. And I had my head way out the window looking at the ground. He was barely moving. And anyway, he saw this from his side. I don't know how. He rode up on a rattlesnake that was piled up in that right-hand track of that little 2-track road, and he stopped exactly while it was under my big head leaning out that window. And I screamed, and when I jerked back, I hit my head on the top of that door, and I think I sprung the door. I know I saw stars. That was the most miserable hunt. And we still have the video of that bow blowing up. It's actually drawn on a pretty nice 8-point, and that bow just shattered, and I got it on video.
It sounded like he thought it sounded like somebody shot a 243. It made such a loud crack sound. Pow.
Yeah. I think it was from the heat, but that technology's come a long way. Back then there were yew wood limbs glued together in layers, and that one didn't hold up. But and again, talk about the kids. You don't want them to go through all that stuff, but I really want them to go through some stuff like we did. So when they actually had success, man, it means something, because if you just scroll social media nowadays, especially this time of the year, and see one giant after another, and I congratulate every one of those people. Don't get me wrong, but sometimes it detaches you from reality a little bit. And I had my grandsons out here last Saturday. I hadn't even told Toxey this, and I did a podcast after the hunt. Ask them some great questions. You'll love this. The last question I asked them was, why is it important to say yes, ma'am, and no, sir, and all that? I just love that. But the next to last question, I was like, what's cool? What's cool about hunting? Do any of your buddies hunt? Do you think anything about hunting is cool? And all three of them talked about camaraderie and different places they had been, and some of the people they had got to meet. They went on, and nobody's ever told one deer story. They were all about, when we went so-and-so, we met this guy, and I learned how to do this. And that's what I really want people to get. That's why we tell so many stories on the Fistful of Dirt podcast and Gamekeepers and all that. I tell so many stories because people love that stuff. And Toxey and I talked about this years ago. He was the marketing guy. Toxey's done a lot, but he's the marketing guy. And he's like, cuz everybody wants to be in the club. I'm like, you're right. That's why he wasn't ever up front. Oh, it wasn't me or him, neither one. It was about the critters and the terrain, telling stories. Everybody wants to be in the club, and I'm telling you, I think we've done a great job of that. Not that it was a marketing strategy, but it's like people love that, in my opinion. I'm just a camera guy, but in my opinion, people love that.
Just a camera guy. Just being yourself. So tell him about. I mean, I know he's gonna not want to tell this one, but he's got to tell it. One time, Cuz had to kill the second biggest deer ever killed in the state of Mississippi. Still one of the biggest ones ever. Actually, the most beautiful, non-typical I've ever seen in my life. But you got to tell that story. And I know a hunt. There's a difference between, how big and beautiful a deer is, and then how the hunt goes. Sometimes we talked about something we remember that was just a doe hunt. Yep. But you got to tell the story because you got to tell where you were, how much it cost you to be there, and all those things. Because I mean, the little guy, the average guy, he don't have to be a big landowner guy for good things to happen for you. Because this was like a hunting club you were in. Tell the story.
Yeah, it was 1981, and I joined my first hunting club, and it was near Olenburg, Mississippi, and it was $65, and I saved all summer to have that $65 ready to go. It was mostly Georgia Pacific land, a lot of cut over and clear cuts and all that stuff, but it was a hunting club. I'd been hunting in the Home Chill National Forest, and I was wanting to get in the hunting club. Everybody was in the hunting club. Anyway, nobody had ever seen this deer. Nobody had pictures. There weren't trail cameras or food plots or none of that stuff back then. I just knew the bucks liked the thick cover. And I had found a spot. It was an old skidder trail in between two big, it was down in a hollow, and the skidder trail went straight down, straight up the other side. And I had half of an old amaker tree stand, the bottom half, and I would stand up in that and hug the tree and pull myself up where I could see half a climber, and I would sit on it. I had a lever action 30-30 Marlin with open sights, and that's just what we hunted. It was no big deal. But I remember that morning I was working a lot at a warehouse down there, and I had gotten off. It was November the 27th. It was like Thanksgiving week, and I had taken like 2 days, and I was not going to not go hunting. It rained at daylight like you wouldn't believe. And looking back, I think that's the only reason I got in there without running that deer off or jumping it out of there or whatever, because it was raining like crazy. And I climbed up and sat down, and it quit raining about 8 o'clock, 8:30, something like that. And I hear this deer coming, and man, it was just raindrops, and you could hear it. But anyway, this deer was kind of trotting, and I looked, and it was a doe, and couldn't shoot does back then. And anyway, it got past me. When it got around to my left, I looked, and it had spikes about this long coming straight back, which was legal. And I can remember, like it was yesterday, I got so mad that I let that deer get by me. I was just beside myself, because that's what I was there for, venison. And anyway, and I was sitting there just, feeling sorry for myself, because I'm going home again empty-handed. And then I hear this. Back then they were three-wheelers, ATC 90. There was a guy that had one in the club, and I could barely hear him. He was way off. And the closer he got within 500 or 600 yards, but that deer got up from that noise, and I could just look down through the brush, and I could see these points like this every once in a while making his way down through there. He was headed right for that skidder trail. Remember I told you? And right before he got to that skidder trail, I pulled the hammer back on that lever action 30-30, and it sounded like somebody shot a 22. Click, click. It was real loud. And when he stepped into that skidder trail, and he heard that click, and he turned and looked right at me. And I put it right there on that curly hair in his brisket, because he had kind of turned, boom, and he just dropped. And didn't know, I knew it was a nice deer, but I didn't really care. I was just so excited to get a deer. So I climbed down with my half a climber, and I got down and started looking at that deer. And I had a buddy hunting with me about 300-400 yards away, and he hollered, "Did you get him?" I said, yeah. How big is it? And I was counting. Points. And the first time I got 30. I said, it's a 30 point. And I can't tell you what he said. And anyway, I handed him again. I said, no, it's 27 points. And I hear him coming down the street. Ended up, it was a giant deer. I didn't know anything about Boone and Crockett or none of that stuff. It was had 27 points on it, double drop tines, double brow tines, 23 inches wide.
Twos on it are bigger than the forks of my fingers I'm holding up. They went up on both sides. I mean, it's the most symmetrical, beautiful, non-typical I've ever seen. Pictures and stuff, incredible. Gross, it was like gross 230 points if you add them all up.
Yeah, it was gross. The final score was 210, 209, and 6/8. There was a bunch of, they were just kind of getting into that scoring. The first score was like 235, something like that. I didn't know anything about it. A guy told me, he said, you got to register for Boone and Crockett. And I was like, what? And so I got, the game board brought me a sheet because he had scored it. And it was like, you had to list all this stuff, mode of transportation. And I had to fill it out. 1963 GMC pickup truck, weapon, Marlin 336C. It was just ridiculous. I was like, people are going to be laughing at me, but some of the funny stuff happened afterwards. You know, they were having all these big buck contests back then. And I entered him in 6 or 7. They had them at Blackwell Chevrolet and Steinberg's in Baton Rouge. And I froze the thing after and went and scored it. And I won all those big buck contests, of course. And I won like 6 or 7 rifles with scopes. And I sold every one of them. And I gave my wife the money because back then we didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. We needed a washer and dryer and all that stuff. So that worked out good. Well, the next summer, like the end of August or 1st September, I'm out mowing the grass. And I feel someone tapping me on the shoulder. And I turn around, it's my wife standing there with a glass of tea. And she said, shouldn't you be going out scouting for deer? Like I'm going to kill another 230-inch, 27-point deer and win 6 more guns. I always laugh when I think about that. But, you know, I learned a lot because I was working at a sporting goods store while I left to go to work for Toxey. And people would come in and say, did you hear about that giant deer down there in Franklin Canyon? Yeah, I heard about it. Well, you know, that guy was hunting at night. And I was like, really? Or he was poaching. He was trespassing on my grandpa. There was just one after another. And I'd say, yeah, that guy must be a thug, man. But it even back then, this is 1981, pre all the stuff we do nowadays, those big antlers will make people say things and act in a way that's not, it'll just make, it kind of turned me off of a big horn thing because it was like, hey, I never claimed anything but a fluke. It was a lucky deal, big, beautiful buck. It wasn't a bunch of 200-inch deer hitting the ground in 1981. But I don't hardly ever tell the story. I finally brought the deer home, just hung it up in my house. But Toxey will bring it up every once in a while.
I mean, just good things happen to good people. I mean, put him on the map. It's kind of like, I think it was kind of divine providence there too. So anyway, that's a great deer story, and that's one I had to get. So I'm gonna tell one real quick. It's like, so some of my, when I start someone, you know, y'all say let's tell deer stories, and I write some stuff. And I think about the first deer with my 3 kids. That's the first thing pops in my mind more than anything. So I think maybe the coolest one was be my daughter, Sarah Francis, and because she's grown, she's got 3 kids. She's 35 years old now. But when she was little, until she was in, you know, maybe off to college, she'd go hunting with me a lot, and she killed a bunch of deer. But her very first deer hunt, it was on Christmas Day afternoon, because, you know, the place where I used to lease forever back behind the store back there where we used to go hunting all the time. And she said, I want to go, Daddy. So I took her, and that was her first time to go deer hunting. And so we had this big transmission line. It was a big, wide one, and we planted it. It would probably give us probably 8 or 10 acres to plant right through the middle of the place. And it was green and pretty. And so we sat on the side of that. I was just like, you know, if she could just shoot a doe, it'd been great for me for her first deer. And we were sitting there, and what I used to do back then, I didn't have a better way. I would take a big sleeping bag and roll it up and tie it up where it was like a round, in a round ball. And I'd put that in their lap, and then they could get a rest on that sitting in their lap. Plus, it kind of helped keep them warm just a little bit. We're sitting at the base of a tree, just kind of like we're turkey hunting, and she's got that in her lap, and it's pointed out in the power line. And, she wasn't looking at the scope or anything, but it was pointed out that way. And we sat there and hadn't seen anything. And I look back in the timber, 180 degrees away from where she's facing, and I see a deer. And it starts coming. And it's actually, in that time of year, you heard us talk about the rut when it was, in the latter stages of the rut too. And it turned out to be a 7-point. It was a buck. And I was like, oh my goodness, But I was like, I see a buck. And she was like, what do? I said, you can't move. We're in the wide open. And he's walking right towards us. And if you move, he's going to see us. It was like 100 yards and then 75 yards and then 50 yards. And that deer was completely in a stupor over looking for does for the last 10 days or 2 weeks. And he walks right by us about 3 or 4 yards away. And he's just kind of in a blank stare and walks straight out in that power line in the middle of her scope. And I said, do you see him? She said, yeah, he's right. I said, get the black crosshairs on him. She said, they're already on him. That deer walked and stopped right in her crosshairs. Boom, killed her first deer on Christmas afternoon. So we always try to go if we can on Christmas afternoon if family permits after that. And it was like,
and didn't Daniel shoot a pretty good buck on Christmas Day?
What's that?
Didn't you or Daniel shoot a good buck on Christmas Day just a couple of years ago too?
Yes. Yep. Christmas has been good because, it's around here in West Point and in Mississippi where Cousin's farm is here too. For whatever reason, and that's probably like this in a lot of parts of the country, but typically, I'll see more good deer will die like pre-rut or right at the beginning. But by far the most really big ones that are around here I've seen dead or die or killed or cut and he talked about it, is right at Christmas, like right at the very tail end of the rut. And I always try to, I think, and talking to people smarter than me with deer, agreed, it's like those old deer are so experienced, they've been with a doe for a while at the end of the rut. And they're used to it. They're kind of spoiled, and they're also kind of spent, and they haven't been eating as much and a little bit crazy. They might have been fighting and all that stuff too. And then all of a sudden, having your nose up a doe's rear end for weeks, you can't find one. And that's when they really walk and move in odd times, middle of the day and so forth. And that's where most of the really good ones around here die, is the very end, at the tail end or right after the rut post even. Just, I don't know why. So that's what that was that day. And I'll say Daniel's first deer teaches me a lesson that I was trying to teach him anyway. He was 7, and he and Neil could shoot the lights out with like an open sight BB gun and stuff. But then I would try to get them to shoot a scope, and they couldn't navigate the hourly. And so they said, Daddy, I can't handle the black hole. I can't do it. I said, well, until you do that, we can't go deer hunting. And so finally, it was opening day. Cuz had a bunch of people in. We were having riders and guests hunting. And so I'm going to take Daniel on his first. They drew straws. Daniel got to go. And so I said, but we're going to go out there. And I had just a 22. I said, you're going to prove to me you can shoot accurately with this scope or you're not going to go. Okay. And he finally, I sat him on the tire of the truck with a rest with that sleeping bag rig like I described, and got a target set up. He shot the first one within like an inch at about, I think it was 50 yards. And with that 22, because I didn't want him to flinch. And then he shot like 4 or 5 in a row right in the middle of the bullseye. I was like, he's got it now. Let's go. And I had a little 243 that I hunted with as a kid. I'd kept it as a bolt action. And so we went and sat, had that sleeping bag in his lap, and right at dark, a beautiful 8-point comes out. And hold it on him. Steady, boom, deer's just standing there after he shoots, just looking at us. And I was like, you missed him, put another shot, put another shell in, he puts another shell in right when he closes it, the deer, and it's probably been standing there for 10 seconds, didn't flinch, nothing. He runs off in this big cane thicket. And man, he was so sad. I was like, man, it's okay. I missed so many deer before I killed one. Don't worry about it. You know, he was just like, oh my gosh, his confidence was blown and whatever. So we go back, we're with the guest. I have to get up the next morning. And I said, look, I'm going to go back. And I was just going to try to prove a point. I'm going to go back and look for that deer because you always go back, no matter what. Even if you're so sure you missed one, you go look to make sure. So I went back. And I said, you know, I told my son I was going to do that. I'm going to go. And, you know, I would just walk down there. And I don't know, something in the back of my mind told me maybe there was a chance. But honestly, I was doing it so I wouldn't have lied to my son to say I was going to. And literally, I walk in the woods like 100 yards, and there's this beautiful 8-point laying there dead. He had drilled him right through the heart. And why that deer didn't flinch or show any sign of being hit or just stand there, I'll never know. So then I went back and got him and kind of made up the story. So let's go look for him together. And anyway, that's how he killed his first deer. And my blessing in saying that one is like for everybody out there, is always go look, no matter what, always go check, no matter if you're sure you missed. And that's what I learned off Daniel's first deer. Cuz.
Yeah, that's good advice. You got to tell them, you might as well go ahead and tell them the water buck story because that's the one that's got the most views, and your recollection of it's way better than mine. And they can go to YouTube, the Mossy Oaks YouTube, or you know, whatever, the Go app, and just type in the water buck if they want to see. I think the only thing's got more views than that's that giant snake, and it's way up in the millions and millions by now. But tell them about the water buck.
Take it. I'm gonna let you tell it, and then I'll jump in on it. We tell it together. You tell it. Set it up for them.
Yeah, we were hunting down near Columbia, Mississippi, and it was one of the rare you know, Mississippi, it can be 80 degrees at Christmas, but this was like one of those times where it was cold. And a friend of Toxey's and Will Primos had invited us down there, and we didn't have any idea about the place. So we didn't have onX. Back then, it was a topo map if you were lucky and looking for posted signs. But we scattering, you know, the acorns are kind of gone. But anyway, we found a creek, and it had some good cross and all. We ended up climbing 2 trees with summit climbing stands. We were 15 feet apart because the trees were small. But it was kind of, you know, that let's hunt here. We're tired. It's getting daylight. We got to hang and hunt somewhere. And it was the most miserable 2 or 3 days we had been hunting, hadn't seen a deer. And I don't mean a buck, I mean a deer. Yeah, Toxey sitting there rocking back and forth.
Hey, let me say, we've been hunting for about a year or two, and we are still, and he's all the time, and we aren't even producing any TV or videos or stuff. We were just filming to actually hope we could get something to let Will Primos use it on his videos, you know, for promotional purposes, just kind of help them and do it. And so we had, how long have we been trying? A year or two?
At least a year to film a buck. We killed some does.
Yeah, never killed a buck.
No bucks. And Toxey, we sitting there, and it was so cold. I remember looking at that water. It was a big slough or a creek or something, and the ice had frozen. It was 6 inches out into the water, and I was like, "Man, it's freezing." We ain't heard a deer walking. And Toxey's like, he's just sitting there. He's about 15 feet away. He looked at me and said, "Cuz, what you gonna do if I shoot a big old deer and it runs out in that water?" I said, "Toxey, if you shoot a buck and it runs out in that water, I'll go get it." And I'm telling you, talk about divine intervention, God listening, whatever. It wasn't minutes. It was just, if that. Toxey, he's giving me that like that, and I turn and look, and heard old big rack coming through there, and I got that camera over there, shoulder holding it, and the deer came through down there, and as soon as he busted out and that little opening was in, he spotted us. We weren't 10 feet off the ground. I think Toxey was already drawn. He was quartering at him a little bit. He had that 80-pound Oregon bow, and he stunk one right up in the shoulder, angling back to the fletching. And that deer took off, and it was the most violent thing you've ever seen. He ran and hit that creek, got hung up in a vine, flipped him over backwards, and he got out in the water and made a little circle, and then the whole area just turned red, and he just sunk. And I'm looking at through the viewfinder going, please tell me I got that. And anyway, he did. And I was like, that may be the most awesome bow hunt I've ever seen, much less video to this day. And so we got down, and Toxey was like, all right, you said you're going to get him. I was like, I ain't got no problem. So I started wading out there. He said, whoa, 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 whoa. You got to take your pants off. I had bottomland pants and a bottomland jacket on. You're going to freeze to death. And I said, all right.
Hey,
So
hey, he had a suit on. He had a suit underwear on, head to toe.
Yeah, had that. I bought that insulated underwear like at old Tasco. That wasn't even a Walmart back then. Had a big tear in them, and I'm wading out there getting that deer. And if Toxey had picked up my camera, I didn't even know how to. I didn't think he knew how to turn it on. But he filmed me pulling that deer back, and I almost tripped and fell. But I pulled him up on the bank, and my underwear showing. I got a big tear in it, and to this day, I don't care where I go or what I do or what I've been on or how many podcasts, because I watched that water buck. It is the most infamous, embarrassing thing I have ever been a part of, and I'm gonna carry it to my grave. I can't believe he filmed it, but people love when you make fun of yourself. And
Yep.
boy, that's the only way you can handle that. You got to make fun of yourself. I had a guy one time at a show bring me a pair of insulated underwear bottoms in the package, brand new, and hand them to me. And I was like, thank you. I wish I'd have had them the day of the water buck.
He was so modest back then, and he was so worried that I'd filmed it in his underwear. And you can't show that. Why'd you even do that? You can't show that. I said, look at the world we live in today. I mean, and he had on long johns. I'll give me one just or anything like that. It was a full set of fireman from his ankles to his neck, long johns, like you had a jumpsuit on. And, there was nothing indecent about it at all. But he was so worried about showing that. But then, it was just so real. And the last thing he said, he got him to the bank, and he said, "You're not filming that, are you?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Anyway, I still remember you said, okay, now he's yours." And he dropped that deer right at my feet.
Toxey's trying to interview me. He's like, "Is that water cold?" I said, "Yeah, it's cold." He said, "Would you do that again?" I said, "Every day of the week." I was so happy. I was beginning to think we could not do it. And of course, now we weren't hunting in Iowa and Illinois and Kansas and all that. We were hunting these vampire deer down in Mississippi. But that, my friends, was a milestone.
Yeah, and it was we were just like the thing I said earlier. We were just like kids. That's the stuff that made it special. And we weren't judging ourselves against anybody else's deer or anything like that. We were just literally like two kids pull something off. It was we felt like it's like a miracle. Now it happens, hundreds and thousands of times a year for a lot of different people. But that was a good one. That was a landmark one for sure.
Yeah. It's you can do it with your phone now, but man, it was all that equipment we had to carry and stuff. It was it's a wonder we did anything. And like I say, I don't live in the past, but looking back, you got to shake your head and go, "Wow, we pull that off." How in the world?
Yeah, that was hard to do. The bow hunt, filming bow hunts in the South down here, like we did back then, not knowing any more than we did or have anything to help much. It was tough. It was tough. So we celebrated that.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. I have not seen the water buck, but I will be watching as soon as this wraps up. We'll have to go pay a visit to that page. So with just a few minutes left here, guys, talk about your favorite deer camp, whether that's an annual thing, whether it's a one-time deer camp you had. You guys mentioned how important camaraderie is to your enjoyment of the experience, and I know how important it is to so many folks out there. Give us a taste of your favorite camp, and then we'll wrap it up here.
You go first, guys.
Yeah, well, I've been to so many. People always, they'll ask me all the time, you kill big deer, you kill big, and and Toxey the same way. The prime part of my hunting life I spent filming. lugging that camera around, which was enough. I'm telling you that my goal was not to be some famous deer hunter. My goal was to be as good as I could be at telling stories and filming that stuff. So I've been to, I don't know, some of the best hunting camps that you can imagine. But my favorite one is just right here. You know, I was blessed. I mean, I'm trying not to get emotional. I was blessed to be able to get my own little farm after a while. And I got a thing over there, we call it the man den. It was our shop. We actually lived in it, had a little apartment on one side. We turned that into our little hunting camp. And on the opening, the grandkids aren't like fiery-eyed bow hunters right now, but that opening weekend of gun season, they'll all come out and we'll stay over there. Although my house is 100 feet away, and we got a big pot-bellied stove in there. We'll build a fire, and we got a fire ring outside. And if we happen to catch it where it's cold on that opening weekend, I can remember sitting there year before last and watching that fire sparkle a little bit and all that, and looking up and saying, God, I don't know what I did to deserve any of this, but thank you. I will always be grateful. That is my favorite hunting camp these days. But you know, I went to so many just awesome places. But if somebody asks you, got one hunt left, what are you gonna do? Well, I'm gonna probably go over and get everybody in circle and make a big fire, and we may not see nothing but 4 or 5 does or 2 spikes and a 4-point. And I'm telling you, I wouldn't trade that for nothing in the world.
Yeah, I'd have to say, yeah, having all the family at our place is number one. We've had some great company camps. You know, the Lee Haven camp was a ton of fun. Portland Landing was a great place. So, you know, and I've been to some good ones in different places. He and I, in these latter years, we spend so much time with our family and then taking people on our own places. And we don't get out to camps per se like we used to. But those camps where we had all the brothers and even sisters sometimes that were helping pioneer what we did at Mossy Oak in those days, that was some great times. And you know, it was just always more fun when we weren't being guided. You know, we traveled around. I go with Cuz, we go to places, and you get there, they've got the stands, they got it marked, they've done the scouting, they've done anything for you, you just go climb in a tree. And I appreciate that. And it's great. And I love to go do that. But much more fun for he and I is like have the place, plant stuff, get it ready, hang the stands, do the scouting, put people in stands, you know, and watch them enjoy it, whether it be our family or guests. That is what I think today's world is more fun to us in having a camp is actually, and if we do hunt, it's something we did the work ourselves, scouted, figured out. You know, in today's world, the cameras make it so great for finding and patterning, you know, deer, especially whitetails, as tough as they are. So that's kind of I don't know that I can pin a perfect favorite camp. I've had some favorite people, and I'm looking at one right now that I've done it with. Now that I can tell you for sure. So,
you know, I could have fun. I can remember sleeping in an old white Ford Econoline van out in the game reserve, and it got so cold that night, my hair froze to the side of the van. It's just awesome. But you know, here's the thing, and Toxey's never lost sight of this. Toxey's very successful, and it's awesome. I made a post last week. I bought a bow on Craigslist, an old Matthews solo cam, 2004 or 5 model. Might have been the first year they made it. Had the wrong camo on it, and I made a post about painting it. You know, and I was showing them how I mask a bow off. I used to do that at the sporting goods store all the time. And anyway, I paid like $225, and this thing had 18 arrows with it and the rest and all. It had already had the sights and all that stuff. And people went nuts over that. I can't believe you can paint a bow. And I killed a deer with it today, 2 days later. And people were like, that's the coolest thing ever. I got $225 invested in that bow with a homemade Mossy Oak paint job on it. Don't look as good as Bottomland, but it's like, you don't need to have 10,000 acres and you don't need to have a $2,000 bow. You don't need all that stuff. All you need is that passion. If you stay passionate about it, you'll figure all that other stuff out. Am I right?
Oh, no question about it. Yep. I'd have to say that a couple of years ago, excuse me, we're doing a podcast, and Daniel was on the podcast, and he coined a term, and it just struck me as like, and I said, but it's like that sense of wonderment we have as kids when we first go hunting. If you can maintain that all through your career hunting, how incredibly gratifying and how much fun everything is. All this stuff we're talking about, whether you go somewhere or whether you're having people at your place or whatever. So he said it that day. I was like, we need to talk about that more. Make people mindful of like maintaining that sense of wonderment about the whole miracle of getting to go hunting in nature and critters and the incredible whitetail deer. There's something about it. Just gets in your blood. It's in my blood and cousin's blood. And man, we love it. It's just a special time.
And I don't have anything against technology. I don't
No.
want anybody to take my onX app away. I can tell you, I use it for everything, not just because we're sitting here. It's different. And we're telling old stories, and this is cool. And they mesh. You can take old school stuff and bring it into the. I love everything about bow hunting. It's like today, I went to a place where I was like, man, that's my best spot. I took that high-tech PSE. I didn't take my little Craigslist. I took one I know is like, it's the monster bow. But you don't have to have all the best technology all the time to have all the fun. And boy, we've kind of always been about that. I'm very proud of that. So
yeah, so real quick, one of the Winsel brothers told me 35 years ago about the difference between archery and bow hunting. Worth pointing out on a session like this is like, don't confuse archery with bow hunting. And I was like, what do you mean? He said, well, archery is, by definition, is how far can you be from the target and hit the bullseye, right? I said, yeah, sounds right to me. What's the difference? He said, bow hunting is how close you get yourself to the critter. And I thought to myself, what a great way to approach, bow hunting. Is like, and what he said at the time has really gotten out of hand. Now it's like people better and better and better equipment are making bow hunting. How far can I shoot one? And look, hats off to what's going on today and how accurate it is. It's incredible. And I love it. But it still should always be archery is how far hit the bullseye. Bow hunting is how close I can get myself to the critter. Yeah. I just thought that was a great way to look at bow hunting myself. Stuck with me.
My oldest grandson on his first hunt, he might have went once last year, but I took him the opening Saturday and he missed. And him and Matt, my middle grandson, 30 yards shooting 3-inch circles, just bat, bat, bat. I mean, they big, strong boy. And he missed a doe at 20 yards. And he came back and his eyes were that big. Couldn't believe it happened. Had that little adrenaline rush where you have an eye bite. Unless you bow hunt, you don't know what it feels like. And he's like, I saw that arrow go right over her back. And he started talking about the difference. And he said, Pop, he said, it was like primal. He said, I was looking in her eyes. He's like, and I said, boy, you talking about, it ain't about how far, it's about how close. He couldn't believe what that felt like. So that's all we want to do is, man, if I could take that and bottle it up and just give it to somebody, it'd be good. That's why you want them to like learn some of the old stuff, learn some of the new stuff, but just go.
That's right. Yep. Exactly right.
Well, I love it, gentlemen. Some profound words of wisdom, some great stories. And two legends of the woods, no doubt about it. So thank you for spending the time with us this evening, sharing some all-time stories. But I have a water buck episode that I need to go familiarize myself with, as do multiple other people here from the chat. So Toxey, cuz, greatly appreciate the time tonight. Good luck out in the trees when things start to heat up, and good luck to all of you attending. Thanks for coming out, and enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for doing it, onX. We love y'all.
Thank you.